Okay. Hello and welcome everyone to the Remote Internship. This is a conversation on how to maximize your potential while working a remote design internship. My name is Alexa. Before we get into a more formal introductions with everyone, I wanted to start with a shout out to the organization that's helping us make this happen today. As you know now, we are using Zoom to host this event, and Zoom costs money to host large group gatherings like this one. So a huge thank you to the University of Waterloo's student design organization, design community, UW-UX, for bringing us together today. Whether you are a student at Waterloo or not, you can find them on Facebook or on Instagram at UW_UX to join in on the weekly virtual design events and workshops that they're hosting for students throughout the summer. Super, super cool. And I'm sure Queenie has a lot more information on that if you have questions later on. So next is the importance of acknowledging the moment that we're in. I felt very sad and frustrated over this last week, as I'm sure a lot of you have been feeling as well. It's clear to me that systemic racism has a long history throughout the world, and especially where I live in the United States, which has caused a lot of pain and a lot of suffering. You know, in recent times, we've been making great progress, and still we're not there yet. So this means there's great opportunity for us to work on being better and to support our friends in the Black community to create systematic change that we need. As a creator myself, I'm excited and energized and ready to get to work. Now, before we jump into the main content of today, I wanted to start by giving some background into why this event was created in the first place. Maybe some of you know Queenie Wu. She's one of the creators and leaders of the 16 Weeks of Internships project, which I believe she'll be giving you more context into in the slides to come. Recently, she created a project called Remote Coffee Chats with Students, which was launched in the midst of this global pandemic. The project connected students with full-timers like myself to talk about the challenges students were facing, especially with the uncertainty of losing job opportunities. Fast forward to this very moment, we're all here today because Queenie recognized there was another problem to be solved. While many internships were canceled or postponed for those who still had jobs, they would now be working remotely, which can feel intimidating. I don't know about any of you, but I'm very, very excited to see what Queenie comes up next. But today, we're here to talk about providing context. So all three of us have some sort of experience working in a remote setting. I've been working professionally for about 6 or 7 years, and at a distributed company for about 3 years, remotely since the pandemic started. Queenie worked a remote internship at her last internship, and then Raf is currently in a remote internship. So we really want to provide you with that context. A lot of you might be here because you're uncertain while you're in your internship. So we want to help build certainty here. We also want to create a space for conversation. So we do really want this event to be as interactive as possible, even though it's virtual. So please feel free to use the chat to discuss amongst yourselves, pose questions. We will have a Q&A at the end to hopefully help you with any more specific questions that you may have about this topic. And then also fostering community. We're all here today because of the same reason, and we really want to be supportive for some of these concerns that everyone has. So we really hope that this can foster something much greater, and you can kind of, you'll get support from us, but then maybe you can share that support with someone else later on as well. So a little bit more about me. We're gonna switch into introductions. So like I said, my name is Alexa, full name Alexa Harazenchuk. Professionally, for most of my professional career, I've been a product designer. In my last role, I was a senior product designer at Zendesk, and at Zendesk, we build software for the best customer experiences. More recently, I've actually switched my role, still within Zendesk, within my current company, but into design operations. And in my new role, I'm now the design community manager for the Zendesk creative department. And to summarize my new role, really what I focus on is building teams, fostering connection, and designing memorable experiences. But my job and what I do is totally a story for another time. A couple of things that I enjoy doing. I love basketball, huge part of my life. It's a huge part of who I am, both personally and professionally. I've been playing since I was probably in like 3rd or 4th grade. So a lot of the attributes of and skills and things that I think that I bring to a team professionally, I think I learned while playing basketball. And that's just a photo of one of my teams back in San Francisco. Love this group of people, they're amazing. The photo below that is a photo of matcha, which is one of my favorite drinks. I don't really drink coffee, I love tea. And when I get to choose, I choose matcha. And I love this photo in particular because this is actually a photo from the day Queenie and I met in person for the first time. And this is right before the pandemic hit. So it was really cool to connect before this all went down. My background is in graphic design. I got a graphic design BFA at San Francisco Design School called California College of the Arts. While I was there, I discovered my love and passion for product design. So I did 3 UX design internships before I graduated. I've spent a majority of my professional career in business software, which I didn't realize, like I kind of accidentally fell into, but I do love it. I worked both at Yelp and Zendesk, both on the business side of product design. And then I've spent about 2.5 years on YouTube. So the photo on the right is a screenshot of some of the thumbnails of my videos. I make videos about product design, careers in tech, life in San Francisco, which is usually where I'm at. So I've loved being able to learn how to tell stories in this way, connect with people from all over the world through talking about and connecting people in the product design community. So that's a bit about me, and I hand it over to Queenie.
Cool. Hello, I'm Queenie. I'm currently in my 3rd year at system design engineering at the University of Waterloo. Previously, I've interned designing e-commerce products at Shopify, mapping products at Palantir, and most recently a research internship at Handshake, kind of discovering or figuring out how students approach their career or their career search, which is also a reason why I'm super excited about today, because I'm someone who really, really values building community and constantly learning. So I think that internships and just like building the student community is super important. So in that is also UX, which I'd like to give a shout out to. We're hosting almost weekly events this summer, which is super cool because you can join in from anywhere in the world, just like this one. So if you're interested, definitely check out at UX_UX. I should have included that on Instagram, or you can find us on Facebook, and we'll have events and everything like that posted. Yeah, and 16 weeks of internships is also under there. Just trying to humanize job descriptions that usually look kind of scary, as well as what I meant by the student journey was just my project most recently of just trying to figure out what everyone's thinking about when it comes to careers and when it comes to career development. So yeah, this is something that I really love being a part of.
Hey guys, yeah, I'm Rafael. I finished my 3rd year at the York Sheridan design program. I'm just finishing up my gap year, which I was able to focus on internships. I was a design intern at an agency called Craftwork. What? Oh, my screen bugged out for a second. I was a junior UX designer at an agency called Valtech. I'm currently a design intern at Microsoft. I had a great mentor at Valtech, who was actually my remote mentor because she lives in Edmonton and office was in Toronto. So being able to share some of her insights and some of the insights I picked up throughout my time there is something I'm excited about. So yeah, what's up guys?
Awesome. So just a quick reminder to use the chat for conversation and post questions for the Q&A at the end. We do want this to be interactive, and hopefully we can create some relationships here. So with that, I'll do the next slide. And I'll kick things off with talking about building context remotely. So the truth is that building context takes time. It can take time to get familiar with the complexities of a product. For full-timers, it can sometimes take upwards of 6 months to fully get onboarded to the problems of a specific product. So there's really only so much context you can build within 3 months or so, right? And like that's the length of an average design internship. So that's not new to remote working at all. That's just that it is a challenge. That's how it works. So now that we are remote, I know it can feel more daunting, but the challenge is still fairly similar. And that's because for the most part, you're still going to be meeting with people. You'll still be meeting with the same people. You'll still have similar meetings. You're still going to be able to have opportunities to build that context. It's just going to be in a little bit of a different way. So don't be too hard on yourself. Although most companies haven't been remote until this pandemic hit, many actually have the practice. So a lot of companies actually have multiple offices. And so that means that they've already got practice with having some processes in place. They've probably already bought software tools that actually have just been enabled and made it easier for teams to work more collaboratively in a digital way. My company, Zendesk, for example, we have offices where designers work out of in 10 different locations. And that's many, many different time zones. So I've been working at Zendesk for about 3 years. So my whole time there, I've been actually working and collaborating with people all over the world in this sort of remote-like way. We call it distributed. So a lot of what we've built into our processes are already there. So all I'm trying to say is that a lot of your companies, you don't have to be so intimidated. A lot of your companies will already have a lot of this process in place. And that just leads me to my first tip, which is to read documentation. And reading documentation is super important, especially within the first 1 to 2 weeks of your internship. You kind of want to read documentation as if it were like reading a book, like really dig into the weeds of it. And it's true that working remote means that there isn't work up on the walls, which I know is a little bit intimidating for people. You can't just go up to the walls and like check the post-it notes and like be a part of a project you wouldn't have otherwise been a part of, because there it is in front of your face. And actually that is the reason why that sort of framework was established, of like putting work up on the walls, because that invited people to be a part of a conversation that they wouldn't have been otherwise been a part of. But you know, what's really cool about now that we're all remote is we're all on the same sort of level playing field. All that work that would have been up on the walls still exists and will be documented. And it had to been documented because it needs to be saved and it needs to be able to be archived and needs to be able to be referenced. And so even though it's not gonna be up on the walls anymore, it just means you have to go and kind of search for it. So it's a little bit extra time and like a little bit extra of a challenge maybe to go and find it, but that doesn't mean that you can't build that context anymore. It still is there. You just have to find it. So, you know, where do teams and companies put their documentation? It really, really depends. There's lots of different places. Google Suite, they have a lot of products. So Google Slides, Google Docs, Google Sheets. Actually, Google Slides is one of my favorite documentation tools. Like I said, I've been working at a distributed company for the last 3 years. And so whenever I had to create any sort of documentation that I would send out to someone, maybe in our Melbourne office, I would use Slides to present that work to them, because it enabled me to put the work in sort of a story-like format, use visuals and links and text to be able to tell that story and share it to them. And so I would then share it out. They would review it in their time zone, send it back with feedback, and then we kind of just collaboratively work off of that. A lot of companies use Confluence because it's an engineering heavy product. And then, you know, Dropbox is another example. So there's a lot of places documentation can exist. And as long as your email, your work email, gives you access to the files, to the folders, to the projects, whatever it is, that means that it's like fair game for you to go and look at and review. And, you know, if there's anything that you're not supposed to look at, basically you will not have access. And there may even be a time where you are supposed to have access to something and your email wasn't given that access. Well, in that case, you ask your manager. But for the most part, you can go down into the weeds and read all of the things and provide yourself with that context. And it's a good thing you can kind of do just on your own. So with all of that context, you also should be creating a library of definitions, because you're going to be reading lots of content that will likely have company jargon, it'll have acronyms, it'll have team names, it'll have words you've never heard before. And so I usually recommend within your first 1 to 2 weeks, as you're reading through this documentation, create a list of what these words are. And at the end, once you've collected the big list of these words, start by defining them. So some of them you might be able to define using Google, like a quick Google search, but some of them you won't, because it's only meaningful for the company and for your team. So ask your manager, ask people on your direct team, whatever it is, just make sure that you've collected definitions for it, so that when you come across this word in a project, or you come across it in a meeting, you already have a place to reference to go back and say, oh, I know what this word means. This is what it means. Now I can apply it to my work. So my final tip is to meet new people. And I think this one is fairly obvious, just because I think internships in general are a great opportunity to meet new people. But what I mean when I say meet new people is I mean meet new people outside of your direct team. You're already going to be meeting with lots of product designers, engineers, product managers. These are people that are directly impacting your work. But what about the people in sales, finance, marketing, customer success? All of these people have a role at your company that will provide you with interesting context that you can apply to your job and your role. And so, you know, I remember my first UX design internship, I think it was back in 2013. I worked at a really small tech startup in Mountain View in the Bay Area. It was maybe 30 to 40 people. And it was just like such a close-knit group that it was like, for the first time I worked in an environment where there was people from such various different backgrounds. And because we were in such a small office, it was like that was who was in all the meetings, that's who you eat lunch with, right? So it was like for the first time I realized, well, one, I love my design school friends. Everyone was, I was hanging out with designers all the time, and it was really great to like, you know, understand just sort of like within design school context and within our work, how we can help support each other. But then there's all these other people with a different background and different area of focus within the company that you can learn from as well. And their work both directly and indirectly affects your work. So I think it's really important that you're building context by connecting with people who you may not otherwise work with. And the question now is like, how do you apply that remotely, right? Well, you can start by messaging them. A lot of tech companies use internal messaging software tools like Slack. Maybe it's Google Chat, or I know Facebook has their own product too. So like your company is going to have an internal messaging tool. Easiest thing you can do is reach out to someone and just tell them you're curious, interested in learning about what their role is, why they do what they do, and also just their background, because gathering all that context about them and their role will more easily be able to help you understand how their role affects yours. Better yet, you come up with specific questions you want to learn about sales or marketing or customer success, and you know, because maybe it does tie more directly into your job. I used to work on the billing team, so I designed for the buying experience at Zendesk, and so I quickly realized within my role on the team was that there were partners in finance ops, and even sales that were actually like close collaborators for me, that I wasn't necessarily meeting with every day, but I would be collaborating with them at a project by project basis, if not monthly or weekly. So I would just recommend that you start thinking about like, who are these other people that you could reach out to help gather context for your role. And I love goals. I'm a huge advocate for creating goals. If you look up the SMART framework, S-M-A-R-T, look that up on Google, it'll give you a clear sort of framework to writing your goals. What I would recommend with this one in particular, meeting new people, is like, why not make it a goal to meet with 3 to 4 people within your first month of your internship, and see how much context you can get into the product, into the role of all these other people who work on working within the same company, but their work directly or indirectly is related to yours. Better yet than messaging them, which I think is, as far as intimidating goes, pretty low. All they can do is say they don't have time, or maybe not respond, which is totally fine as well. I think better yet, you could try to set up a call with them. It can be kind of scary, but also super normal right now with remote work. A lot of us are doing these like virtual hangouts, virtual video calls, that sort of stuff. So I would recommend if you reach out to someone and you spark some interesting conversation with them, see if you can move it into a more personable conversation on a call, and really see how you can foster that relationship. And if you don't know who to reach out to, a good place to start is your manager, or you can also ask people on your direct team. It's very likely that they have relationships within the company that can help provide you with a place to start and someone to reach out to. So that's it for me. I'm going to pass it over to Queenie.
Yeah, so that ties in super, super well in terms of building trust with your team. So kind of what I'm talking about today a little bit is how to build relationships and trust within your team and beyond. And so meeting new people and kind of like talking to your team is a huge part of that. So one thing that's super, super different about working in person and working remotely is physical space. And speaking as someone who's definitely more extroverted at work, who relies on collaboration and relies on asking questions, this was a huge challenge for me when suddenly everything was online. Because what used to be a physical office space with physical walls that you can tape stuff up on or tap people on the shoulder suddenly became, you're a 200 by 400 pixel box on someone's screen, and that's about it. And so what does that mean in terms of like changing the way you communicate or changing the way that you ask questions online? One thing that I noticed, what happened right away when the company I was working at, Handshake, wasn't super used to being fully remote. We really valued being in person, especially the design team. And so what we saw was that physical collaboration, anytime that we were talking to each other, became endless Slack messages that you can search through, or a day full of meetings that you don't even have time to kind of get up from your seat. And so I think like, even as someone who thought I was like very extroverted, this was super draining. And so that oftentimes makes you not as effective of a communicator and kind of makes you shy away from a lot of the questions or a lot of the things that you otherwise have talked about. So I think like one thing that I learned from there was that there's definitely different ways to communicate different types of information. And so not everything has to be a Slack message, not everything has to be a meeting. I think one really great thing that I learned how to do was creating these like low signal ways to ask questions or to maintain my assumptions. And so what that could mean is like a running doc that you and your mentor, your manager kind of like has access to, but doesn't get notified every time you update something. So writing down all your questions that comes up throughout, especially if you have a lot of like onboarding type meetings in your first week or so, kind of writing down your questions, your assumptions about, maybe it's about your project as well. That way you have a really easy place to kind of pinpoint and see, hey, these are the things that I've learned. Or you can say, these are things that I'm kind of struggling with every time you are checking in with a manager or a mentor. Or they can also kind of come in and comment on things, which is also another really great low signal way to communicate. And then you have obviously Slack and instant messaging and also email. I know emails like sounds like some sort of archaic tool nowadays, but sometimes it can serve as a really great kind of, I guess, table of contents of some sort. So what makes email great is that you can search, it's really easy to search through. So whether you're using Microsoft Office tools or G Suite, it's really easy to kind of like search for keywords and find something. So if there's a particular message that has a lot of dependencies, so a lot of links to other docs or links to other files or, you know, links to threads, kind of put them all in one place and be like, hey, this is kind of what I'm working with and any like specific actions. One tiny tip that I learned was that if you're sending a Slack to someone, you also sometimes want to start with actions or sometimes want to start with this particular question, because what's going to happen is that like if someone's in a meeting or someone's focusing on something else and they see like their notification pop up from the top right, they're going to see like the beginning of your message. So if something is really obvious, state at the beginning so that they kind of know, oh, okay, when I like go check my Slack, that's something that I have to do, or that's something, you know, that I'm being asked about. That often is like really easy to keep in mind and makes it super easy for someone to reply to you. Another thing about like taking up space and kind of like translating that physical space into digital space is also just turning on your camera in a call. That way people kind of know you're there. So you're not just like this other name that nobody really like sees, especially if you're in like a smaller medium-sized company where it, you know, if you were in the office, you would get to meet a lot of people and you would get to try and meet everyone. It's a really great way to just like say, hey, I'm here without actually saying anything. So yeah, kind of like a couple of different ways that messages can be communicated across. So another really big thing that also relates to Alexa talks about building relationships is leveraging your expected mentorship. So a lot of internships, you're going to have a dedicated mentor. And if you don't, that's okay too. That might be your manager or your supervisor who's there to kind of track what you're doing or how you're doing, what you're learning, things like that. And so setting explicit goals, like Alexa said, is super important, but you also want to check in on them often. What happens remotely is that you don't have the opportunity to kind of like look over someone's shoulder really quickly and be like, hey, how does this look? There's also less of an opportunity for a mentor to be like, oh, hey, I noticed that you're doing this. Like, what if we tried something else? Or maybe like this other document might be interesting to you. There's less opportunities to do that. And so checking in more often also builds that mutual trust between you and whoever is your manager or your supervisor to kind of understand where you're coming from. But the most important thing is to ask all the dumb questions. This is also a tip for even if your internship is not remote, but I think it's even more important when one's remote because you have less of an opportunity to do those ad hoc. So when you ask all your dumb questions beforehand, it then doesn't become your Achilles heel later on when, you know, you're like halfway into a project and you're like, wait, there's this one question that I totally didn't like ask in the beginning and now I don't know what I'm doing. Because if you ask those later on, sometimes it'll make you feel like, oh, I feel like I don't know everything, or I feel like I don't know enough to start this project. So that'll really help you avoid that situation. And aside from expected mentorship, there's also unexpected mentorship, which comes from meeting new people. So for example, aside from learning about design from the design team, I think one thing that was really positive for me was I wanted to learn about how to communicate more properly or to be more influential in a particular organization. And so I asked my manager, I was like, who's someone that you think excels in influence and communication? And so she mentioned that someone else from a completely different team on the other side of the company was super great at. And so I ended up just like introducing myself to her, saying hello, and it made it really easy later on to ask any questions. So if you introduce yourself early and say who you are, what you're doing, and what you'd love to learn from them, even if you don't initiate a call right away, it's a lot easier for them to know who you are, trust that you're there to ask smart or dumb questions, and makes it a lot easier for you to message them later on instead of having to go through that block of like, okay, I have to introduce myself and then ask these questions and then like try and get on a call with them. Doing that as early as possible makes the rest of your internship and the rest of your experience a lot smoother too. The final cliche is you are also a culture ad. A lot of the times, especially with everything that's going on, it's a very overwhelming time for a lot of people. So sometimes you shouldn't forget to have fun, to try and remind people that like, hey, there's also ways to have fun online. It doesn't have to be a physical happy hour. You don't have to have beer on tap. And so one really fun thing that we did was kind of make a little like break room in a Figma file where we had like a cursor garden. We had like a little bookshelf to share like what you're reading, had a little like vinyl wall to be like, what albums are you listening to, that people can just like drop in and be like, oh, cool. And also used it as a great template for team bonding activities. But yeah, so the kind of like the main things I talked about in terms of communication is learning the appropriate communication tools and when to use them. Ask literally all the questions so that you can build mutual trust in terms of like the context that you have or you don't have, as well as introduce yourself. So it makes it a lot easier to build on top of those relationships later on in your internship.
And on to me. Hey guys, I'm Rafael. I'm here to talk about motivating yourself in a remote internship. Previously, I was at Valtech, in which I spent about 2 months working remotely. So that was when things kind of really shifted from the pandemic, and it was like, okay, cool, it's mandated. We had a pretty flexible work from home policy, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't take advantage of it. But it's a total different vibe when you are mandated to work from home than choosing to work from home. And now at my new internship at Microsoft, it's completely remote. So I'm here to share some some little tips and tricks about how I keep myself motivated throughout the day. So yeah, I guess the first tip I can talk about is to build a new routine. Nothing about now is really normal. Everyone that says like, oh, it's the new normal is kind of weird in my opinion. There's nothing normal about what's going on right now. It's easy to fall into like this new routine of like rolling out of your bed and just like working. The vibe of like taking the laptop, getting into bed, and taking your meetings from there. But for me, I think you really need to keep that work-life balance, or else you really run the danger of burning yourself out. And so the way to keep that is to sort of build a new routine by leveraging old ones. So one thing I like to say whenever someone talks about what I do when I first get out of bed and working remotely is I put on pants. Putting on pants is an old routine that you get from working anywhere. You know, you choose your fit, make sure you're looking good, and then you get to your workday. And that kind of keeps you in that mentality of this is when I need to be working. This is like the time I need to be like focused. And it also enforces like this Asian mentality I have, where my mom wouldn't let me go into bed with outside clothes, so it stops me from getting back into bed. So it keeps me at the desk, keeps me focused, and also makes me feel like I'm ready for work. Other habits include like going for a walk before work, during lunch, and after work, because you're not getting that sort of commute that you would have in the morning after work, or even just like grabbing lunch. Being able to simulate that kind of keeps the rhythm going, gives you those mental breaks as well between separating like your home life, your life from work. And at least for me, it just helps the day go by faster. I feel like when you roll out of bed and you just go straight to your desk, the day feels very super sluggish and slow, because you don't know, you can't really draw the line from when that day started. So being able to start that day right, have some time in between, just roll into things. We've all seen this meme, simulating daily rituals when you're working from home. And I know like it's we've seen it and people make jokes about it, but it's true. It's a thing that really helps to mentally at least keep yourself composed throughout the day. The next step, tracking your tasks and prioritizing. For me, checklists are very addictive. It's kind of like, I got one thing done, let's see how much I can get done throughout the day. Usually ordering things from like, the easiest thing to the hardest thing, or however you want to tackle it, really helps you kind of get into that workflow that you'd normally get into working in the office, talking with people. You kind of have a way to visualize your tasks and be like, whether they're at home tasks or whether they're for actual work, just seeing that checklist go down is kind of keeps me motivated. It's like, okay, I'm getting so much work done. I'm so productive, dude. This is so good. This is so cool. And just being able to like get anything done, like small wins throughout the day while working remotely, kind of pushes the idea of like, feeling sluggish away. It gives you like a way to just visualize everything. But it really gets tough to get this work done when your day is really filled with meetings. Working remotely, this is just what happens. If people find some time in your calendar, they will fill it, like whether you like it or not, unless give yourself some focus time. So this kind of plays back into what I was talking about in building a routine. Putting yourself into a new habit. Although you're leveraging old ones, you might need to build new ones. So focus time, put yourself on do not disturb. I mean, of course, if you need to answer something really important, answer it, but giving yourself some time every day, say like 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. is your focus time, really gives you that time where you're like, okay, I don't have to worry about anything at this moment. No one's going to message me. There's nothing important going on. No one is trying to get my time right now for a meeting. I can spend some time really producing or getting some work done. And that really helps with the motivation, because I don't know about anybody else, but video meetings tend to be much more exhausting than physical. Like being in the office with others, I feel like being in the office is very invigorating because like, it's that social interaction. But video meetings, it's like, I am looking here. I have to be very present, and it's exhausting. And so having some focus time, giving yourself some time to breathe in between the day is really important, which also leads into a great segue into just being honest with yourself, taking a break when you need it. Again, it's not normal. Like now is not a normal time. If you're not feeling like you're up to work during the regular 9 to 5 schedule, as long as you're not missing any important meetings and you're not missing any deadlines, be honest with yourself. Do you feel like working right now? Are you mentally blocked? Take some time, take a break, cook something for yourself, like build something, do anything to get your mind cleared from that haze that you might have because of how weird the time is right now. I think a lot of this is just being honest with yourself, knowing who you are in terms of how you work and whether or not you feel like you can get work done at that time. And just the last takeaway I could get into is just, if you haven't listened to anything at all of what I said, just know that all you really need to do is like find your own rhythm. You really know yourself best and how you can work and how like productive you can be during any time. Maybe you even want to just take if you have no meetings during the day, if you don't have anything to do, maybe you work nights and you're more productive then. If that's your rhythm, go do it. Why not? Put your pants on, you're good. And with that, I guess we can lead into the Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Queenie and Raf. That was so great. So yeah, we're going to jump into the Q&A. A lot of you sent in questions early, which was really great. And I see a couple in the chat, so we'll jump into these. Before I do, just want to mention Queenie, Raf, and myself, we've all included one link below to connect with us after this. Like I said at the beginning, we want this event to be really like the start of a conversation or the beginning of a conversation. Really what's important is fostering connection, fostering community. And so Twitter for Queenie, Twitter for Raf, and I'm the oddball. I love Instagram, but feel free to tweet at us, DM us, and we'd love to connect with you further. And let's jump into questions. So my first one is actually for Queenie. Someone was asking about how to build good relationships with their manager and that they're feeling a lot of imposter syndrome going into their internship. So I was just wondering, in regards to like building good relationships with your manager, do you have anything specific?
Yeah, imposter syndrome is something I think like every designer has/goes through at least twice in their career. If you've only gone through it once, there's like another wave coming. Yeah, what imposter syndrome is just like feeling like you didn't do anything to like be here, like you don't deserve what you have, or like there's a really big mismatch between what you think is like people expect you to do versus like what you feel like you're doing. And I think like when it comes to your manager, that's someone that you can be pretty like honest with in terms of like career growth. They're there, like managers are there for you to like figure out what your next step in your career looks like. So maybe for an intern, it looks like getting a full-time role, or maybe it looks like developing your skills in a particular design skill set. So I think what in the past I've done is literally be like, hey, these are the things that I literally don't know. And I don't know if that's expected of me. Like, hey, I don't have any knowledge when it comes to visual design vocabulary. So I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to feedback. And so doing that, one, gives your manager the ability to point you to resources that will be really helpful in terms of actually learning or developing that skill. Or two, sometimes it also gives a signal to your mentor or manager to be like, to give you those opportunities to learn, whether or not that's within a critique and being like, hey, you know, what do you think about like this particular thing? And then like helping you gain that vocabulary, or and making you feel more confident in those skills, or gaining those skills if you actually don't have them. That's kind of what I've done in the past. And I feel like that's been pretty helpful.
Yeah. And you know what? Your manager is also just another person. So you don't have to be scared of them. They want you to just be yourself. You know, they know that you're trying your best and trying to do your best work. So if you're having any problems or issues, if you have questions, just go to them. They're another person that's just there for you. Love that, Queenie. Actually, before we go into the next question, do you mind taking off the slides so we can show our faces more? Yeah, miraculously. Okay, perfect. All right, Raf, I have a question for you. Just in the chat now, Sue asks, what are some tools that you would recommend for tracking tasks?
Okay, there's a whole bunch of tools I use personally. My favorite tool is TickTick. It sounds kind of weird. I'm gonna type it in the chat. It's not I've spent too much time on TikTok today. It's a general to-do list app and kind of helps you organize your tasks via categories. But one of my favorite features is the Pomodoro feature. So it has that built-in Pomodoro technique within your menu bar if you're on a Mac, and lets you set like working time from 25 minutes and kind of like sets all your alerts off, and it's like, hey, 25 minutes, you can take a break in 5 minutes. It's the one I found the most useful.
Do you have any software tools that you use?
I am a physical check off things person. Whenever I'm working, I have like 7 sticky notes here, a notepad here, something here. Like sometimes if software doesn't work for you, physical notes and physical notebooks are great as well. And it also gives you the satisfaction of being like, hey, I'm done this task, now I can rip it up.
Yeah. Queenie, I'm the exact same. I love Post-it notes. If anyone follows me or my work, it's like, you will know I love Post-it notes. It's like the same thing. Like on a Monday, or, you know, if I'm thinking about tasks for the week, I'll do it on Monday, or even just day to day. I write down what it is I want to accomplish that day on a Post-it note, one idea or task per Post-it note. When you're done with it, you get to crumple it up, throw it away, and then you're done with it. It's just like an easy way to sort of move them around and manage them and stuff. So
actually, another thing that I also do is on Google Calendar, I'll make a separate calendar that other people can't see, and then I'll use it as my to-do list. So I'll set a block that says finish this iteration or something like that. And then when the time passes, I feel more guilty if I didn't do it. So that also works.
Right. Yeah, I love Google Calendar. It's like I follow my Google Calendar every day, even for all my personal stuff. And so I'll set up blocks of time for myself on my work calendar where I'm like, this is work time. So no meetings, work time. And that's sort of how I manage my time as well. So, all right, let's do another question. Someone asked, how should I set my goals for the internship? And actually, I sort of wanted to start by kicking this one off, but if either of you have an idea, feel free to jump in afterwards. So like I said earlier, I love goals. Goals are super important to me. It's how I just like understand how I've made progress in my life, how I've accomplished certain like skills or like things that I want to do, both personally and professionally. And so for quite a long time now, I've been using the SMART framework. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And so if you use those 5 components to design your goal, you're going to create a goal that will you'll be able to, at the end of the time frame, you'll be able to understand if you've achieved it or not. And so it's pretty well-known framework, so you can Google it, but I recommend before, or like at the very beginning of your internship, write down like 3 to 4 goals of things that you want to accomplish by the end of your internship, and write them down. It's really important to get them out of your head and onto paper or into some sort of format where you can read it. Write them down, and then make sure you revisit them at the end of your internship too. And you want to make goals that are achievable, because that's one of the measures, but you also want to push yourself. So really like set some goals that are like potentially hard to reach, so you can really push yourself. But that's what I would recommend. Have either of you, Raf or Queenie, did either of you sort of think about goals going into your internships?
Yeah, I just have like some general advice with setting goals for yourself, because it comes from like my experience, I think. And also adding on to the idea of like your manager is a person, they're there to like set you up for success. Again, just be honest with what you're not good at. You have the job, you have the internship. No one's gonna get mad at you if you suck at presentations. If you say like, hey, like I really want to work on my presentation skills because I'm really nervous and like I stutter a lot, they'll help you. Like there's no shame in like there's no shame in saying that. And they'll set yourself up, and like just be honest with where you want to be, and just you don't have to be the perfect intern. You are an intern. You're supposed to get better.
Yeah, Riley just said in the chat, which I thought was super great, is that I found it helps to do 2 separate lists of short and long-term goals as well. That way you can map your progress with the internship. I totally agree with this. And also, I just want to say that like your goals will also change throughout the internship. You're going to learn new things. You're going to learn things that you didn't know before, or you didn't even know existed before, that you now want to improve on. I think this really applies to people who are like, I don't even know what I don't know. And I totally related with that in like my first internship, definitely, where I was like, hey, I literally don't know what I want to improve because I don't really know what this design thing is. And so like also being upfront about that, a goal could also be like, I want to learn how to set goals when it comes to my career. So if those things don't come to mind right away if you're writing them down before an internship, that's fine too. Don't be super stressed about that.
So Queenie, you recently just did a design research internship. So I wanted to ask you this question. Well, in the research phase, doing the interviews and etc., what would the difference between being remote or in the office be in regards to facilitating research? Or has anything changed?
Good question. Actually, a lot of our research, whether it was interviews or testing, happened remotely anyway, just because the company that I worked with, Handshake, had users all over America. So we rarely actually like brought people into the office. But I think like what also changed was that like especially when you're doing evaluative research, which is like usability testing or concept testing, when you're doing it remotely and over like a video, it's a lot harder to kind of keep track of what they're doing and the reaction. But also at the same time, it's a lot easier because what you see is also the exact same thing as what your note taker sees, because then you can kind of like really share that context and be able to kind of chat about like any questions that you forgot to ask in like a side chat or something like that. So facilitating those that type of research actually becomes a lot easier when you can co-collaborate with someone right through the screen. And so yeah, I think like I don't have too much insight, just because that stuff like that didn't really change for us when it came to being in person or remote. So I'd also love to hear if that changed for either of you, or you guys have an experience with that too.
Yeah, for the research phase, the discovery phase, it was weird because we're doing user interviews, and normally we like to like my experience is like, sitting with the user, seeing how they interact with something, and just kind of taking notes. But it was kind of weird in how we had to do that. We did it via Microsoft Teams, and we're just kind of like talking to someone and just kind of being like, can we follow your mouse clicks? Like you must install this package. It was a whole bunch of most of it that changed was the logistics thing. Just how do we get this product to the user so they can use it properly in the way that we want them to. That was the biggest challenge we had to overcome. Everything else was pretty straightforward in how we translated that to remote. Taking notes, it's just typing it out or writing it in our notebooks. But that was the biggest hurdle. Like, how do we get this to you in a usable format?
I don't think I have anything new to contribute past what either of you said. Just that I think research is often facilitated remotely already because you're not always where your customers are, or at least that's been my experience working in business software. A lot of that I think should already kind of fall into place. Question for you, Raf. When you feel like you have no motivation, how do you differentiate a low moment from being unsure if it's like you just can't figure out the design?
Well, I guess it comes with like knowing myself. If I can't figure out the design, I will literally look at whatever file, the Figma or my sketches, and just like look at it until I figure something out, or like start drawing and just try to like physically or like just work through that block. But when I know I am not motivated is when I put I put the Figma file to the side and then open Netflix, and I'm like, wait, hold on. I shouldn't be doing this. And that's when I understand that like there needs to be some sort of physical reset for myself. So it's when I like put my mask on, go for a walk, see if I could just think it through in the back of my mind without resulting to sitting on the couch and watching YouTube all day.
Which, I mean, there's a lot of great stuff on YouTube. Can't deny that. I think the truth is that it's hard to tell just because life is fluid, and like it could be just like you're having a weird moment and like that's blocking you from some sort of being able to figure out the design, like the challenge that's in front of you, or maybe it is you need to talk to someone else on the team to like clarify something. I think it's hard. Give yourself time. Talk to other people, go for a walk. That's all really good recommendations. What are the advantages of working remote as an intern? I love this question because I think it's like looking on the bright side. Like, what are actually some advantages of working remote? How has working remote actually been beneficial for our work and what we do?
Just for me, like, I know I talked a lot about like getting inside of your own head and working throughout the day, but for me, I've taken up a lot more things I can do in my spare time. There's less time commuting. So I never thought I'd say I miss commuting, but it's good that I'm not commuting as much as I used to. You're also, of course, an obvious advantage is saving money. you don't, although you're not going out with your coworkers, and that's sad. You're saving that dough. But on a real note, it's just having more time for yourself to reflect on like your progress, who you are, being able to have more time to discover more things. It's harder, but it's also easier to connect with people because people that I might not have ever met with in the office, like just walk through, I can just search them on the company website and be like, hey, I can totally just message this dude just right now. And again, it's also like being able to build your own schedule. There's a recommended time, but there's no like real need for you to work the 9 to 5 unless you're being dependent on for your team. But being able to find your own rhythm during this time, bringing it back.
Mm-hmm. Echoing like meeting the people that you wouldn't normally meet as well. Like I think not even just like within the company, but also people in the industry that you look up to are also at least I found a lot more receptive to like meeting online as well, meeting virtually, and like it also. Your remote internship also gives you like a prompt to like reach out to the people that you look up to. So for example, it could be like, hey, I noticed that you're really influential in this like particular side of things. And I really look up to the way that you like talked about this in a particular event or an article. That's super awesome. There's also a lot of online events to go to. I think like that's been a benefit of like remote working. Just like every single company ever has been coming up with like online events that you can go to from anywhere. So yeah, I think like online and virtual meetings kind of open up an opportunity to meet the people that normally you would have never thought of reaching out to as well.
I think that brings us just about at time. Thank you again, everyone, for joining. This was such a cool experience. So great to see so many people join for this discussion. Like I said earlier, we really want to keep this conversation going. We really think this is the beginning. Not only is it the beginning for a lot of you for your internships, but hopefully for like the support that we can all provide for each other as we go into this sort of oddball, like unique experience. Like I said earlier, don't forget to connect with us on Twitter or on Instagram. Look at the 16 Weeks of Internship project. It's a YouTube channel too. You can just check it out on YouTube and all the things. So that's all for now. And yeah, hope to see you around.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.